Hello everyone, it's Jen from Old Tinkerer Studio, and welcome to the 5th tutorial of the 3D Low Poly Game Modeling for Beginners series. In this tutorial, we will be modeling a low poly fantasy style scene. Change the renderer to cycles. Go into orthographic view, which is 5 on the numpad, and front view, which is 1 on the numpad. And delete the cube by hitting X and delete. Add a cylinder with Shift A. And change the vertices to 20. Scale the cylinder along the Z-axis, S, Z, 0.3. Then scale the cylinder along the X and Y axis, S, Shift, Control, Alt, Z, then 5. Then tab into edit mode. Deselect everything with your A key. Add a cylinder using Shift A. Rotate the cylinder around the X-axis 90 degrees. R, X, 90. Use the manipulator and move the cylinder along the X-axis 3 blender units to the left of the central cylinder. Go into face mode with Control Tab. Then select your front and back faces. Then inset them. I, 0.1. Then we want to delete this front and back center faces using your X and just delete faces. Now go into wireframe, which is Z, and deselect everything, which is A. Using box select, which is your B key, select the bottom half of the cylinder and then delete the faces. Go back into solid mode, which is Z, and then select the cylinder using your L key. Use the manipulator and move the cylinder down along the Z-axis until the top portion is at the center point of the original cylinder, so just below the red X-axis line. Scale the cylinder along the X-axis, S, X, 1.5. Use the manipulator and move the cylinder along the X-axis so the right bottom vertex is 3 blender units to the left of the central cylinder. Duplicate the cylinder with Shift D. Then use the manipulator and move the duplicated cylinder along the X-axis 3 blender units to the left of the original cylinder. Duplicate the cylinder with Shift D. Then use the manipulator and move this duplicate 3 blender units over from the second cylinder. Make sure that you're still in face mode and deselect everything with your A key. Select the first portion of the bridge with your L key and duplicate it using Shift D. Then move the duplicate to the right of the first bridge section. Go into wireframe mode, which is Z, and deselect everything with your A key. Use box select and select the right side of the duplicated bridge section. So B and select the right side. Then delete this section with your X key. Then using box select, which again is your B key, select the remaining half of this portion of the bridge. Then go back into solid mode, which is Z, and top view, which is 7 on the numpad. Then use the manipulator and move the half bridge section along the X-axis until it touches the central cylinder. Now select the bottom face of the half bridge section and of the first bridge section. Then we want to bridge the faces. You do this by hitting W, bridge edge loops. And you want to do this for the next 4 faces. Then what we want to do is repeat this process with the first and second bridge sections. And then again with the second and third sections. Now go into edge mode using Control Tab. Then go underneath the bridges and you'll see that the faces are now gone from the inside here, and we'll need to replace those. So what we need to do is select each individual edge and then fill it with a face using your F key. I'll need to do this for each section of the bridge. You notice on this third section these faces are okay because we didn't extrude on the top there. Now go into face mode using Control Tab. Go into wireframe mode, which is Z, and front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Deselect everything with your A key. Using box select, which is your B key, select the left half of the third bridge section. Then delete this section of the bridge with your X key. Then go back into solid mode, which is Z. Now we need to select the top faces of the bridge. And then extrude them along the Z-axis, E.5. Then go ahead and select the top face of the central cylinder and use the manipulator and move it up along the Z-axis until it's the same height as the bridge. Now go into bottom view, which is Control and 7 on the numpad. Then select the bottom 3 faces of the bridge sections and inset them, I, 0.05. Then go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and extrude the faces along the z-axis, E3. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and edge mode using Control Tab. Then add 2 horizontal loop cuts with Control R. Then left click only once. Then scale the edge loops along the y-axis, S, Y. Then slide the edge loops out until they're about 1/10 of a blender unit away from the edges. Now go into face mode using Control Tab, and then select these new faces along the edges. Go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and extrude the faces along the z-axis, E.2. Now go into wireframe mode, which is Z, and using box select, which is your B key, select all the parts of the bridge. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and solid mode, which is Z, and duplicate the bridge using Shift D. Then rotate the duplicated bridge around the z-axis 90 degrees, RZ 90. Then use the manipulator and move the duplicated bridge to the lower section of the central cylinder. Repeat this process until you have 4 bridge sections surrounding the central cylinder. Go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and select the bottom face of the central cylinder. Then move it up along the z-axis until it's the same height as the bottom of the bridge deck. Go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and then select the entire central cylinder with your L key. Then rotate the cylinder around the z-axis 9 degrees, RZ 9. Then go into wireframe, which is Z. Deselect everything with your A key, and then using your box select, which is your B key, select an entire bridge section. Then scale the bridge along the y-axis, SY 0.8. Then go into solid mode, which is Z, and then move the entire bridge section until it is actually attached to the central cylinder. Then repeat this process for the other 3 bridge sections. And just to note, for these top and bottom sections, you scale along the x-axis. Now make sure you're in top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and select the top face of the central cylinder. Then inset the face, I.3. Go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Then extrude the inset face along the z-axis, E.2. Go back into top view, which is 7 on the numpad. Select the top face of the central cylinder and inset the face again, I.1. Go back into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Then extrude this inset face along the z-axis, E.2. Add a cylinder with Shift A. And use the manipulator to move the cylinder on top of the second inset face. Scale the cylinder, S.3. Then scale the cylinder along the z-axis, SZ.2. Then use the manipulator and move the cylinder down along the z-axis until it's sitting on top of the inset face. Go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad. Then select the top face of the cylinder and inset it just by simply hitting I. Then go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. And extrude the face along the z-axis, E.2. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad. Select the top face of the cylinder and inset it by simply hitting I. Then select the entire cylinder with your L key and duplicate it using Shift D. Then rotate the duplicated cylinder around the y-axis 180 degrees, R, Y, 180. And go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. And then use the manipulator and move the duplicated cylinder up along the z-axis until it's about 5 blender units above the original cylinder. Then select the interface of both of the cylinders. And then bridge the edge loops. W, bridge edge loops. Make sure you're in front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and wireframe mode, which is Z. Then using your box select, which is B, select the entire column. Then go back into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and solid mode, which is Z. Then use the manipulator to move the column along the X and Y axis until it sits in front of the second face from the center at the top of the inset step. Duplicate the column using Shift D. Then use the manipulator and move the duplicated column along the X-axis to the left. Select both columns with your L key. and duplicate them using Shift D. Then use the manipulator and move the duplicated columns along the y-axis to the bottom. Add a UV sphere using Shift A. Change these segments to 20 and your rings to 10. Then go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and move the sphere above the columns. Deselect everything with your A key and go into wireframe mode, which is Z. Using box select, which is your B key, select the bottom half of the UV sphere and delete it. Then go back into solid mode, which is Z, and into edge mode using Control Tab. Then select the bottom edge of the UV sphere by holding down your Alt key and right-clicking. And then fill the bottom with a face using your F key. Then go into face mode using Control Tab. Select the entire dome with your L key. And then move it down so it sits on top of the columns. Then scale the dome along the X and Y axis. S, then Shift, Control, Alt, Z, and 2. And make sure it's actually sitting on top of the columns. Now go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and deselect everything. Go into wireframe mode, which is Z. Select the top 2 columns with your L key, and then move them under the dome. Then select the bottom 2 columns with your L key and move them under the dome. And then go back into solid mode with your Z key. And go back into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Add an icosphere using Shift A. And make the subdivisions 1. Then scale the crystal along the X and Y axis. S, Shift, Control, Alt, Z, 0.5. Then move this central crystal along the Z axis until it's centered between the columns. Then duplicate the crystal using Shift D and scale the duplicate S 0.3. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and wireframe, which is Z. And use the manipulator and move the small crystal to the left of the central crystal. Then duplicate the small crystal 3 times and place the duplicates around the central crystal. And then select all the crystals with your L key. and make sure they're centered inside, in between the columns. Then go back into solid mode, which is Z, and front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Make sure you have everything deselected with your A key. Then select one column with your L key and duplicate it using Shift D. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and use the manipulator and move the duplicated column to the bottom center of the first bridge section. Go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad. Then scale this light stand, S.5. Go into wireframe, which is Z. Then move the light stand so it sits on top of the bridge deck. Then go back into solid mode, which is Z, and top view, which is 7 on the numpad. Duplicate the light stand with Shift D and move it along the Y-axis to the top side of the bridge. Go into front view, which is 1 on the numpad, and deselect everything with your A key. Select one of the small crystals using your L key and duplicate it using Shift D. Then use the manipulator and move the duplicated crystal over one of the light stands. And put it about 2/10 of a blender unit above the light stand. Then go into top view, which is 7 on the numpad, and center the crystal over the bottom light stand. Then duplicate the crystal with Shift D and move it above the other light stand. Now select both crystals and both light stands using your L key. And duplicate them using Shift D. Then move the duplicates to the center of the second bridge section. Then duplicate them again using Shift D and move them to the third section of the bridge. Then we need to duplicate the crystals and the light stands and place them on all 4 sections of the bridge. Okay, once you have all this done, we can go ahead and color everything in. Okay, open up your Material tab, click on the plus button and the New button, and rename the material Stone, and change the color to a dark gray. I'm going to use a hex code of 414141. And we're just going to assign this to the entire model. Then click on the plus button and the new button. Then rename this material Lightstone and change the color to a light gray. I'm going to use the hex code of 6B, 6B, 6B. Then we want to select the columns with our L key. Select our inset floor. Select the dome and the light stands. Okay, then assign this light stone color. Click on the plus button and the new button and rename the material Blue Crystal and change the color to a bright blue. I'm going to use the hex code of 06E4E7. Then change the surface from diffuse to emission and change the strength to 3. Then select the central crystals and apply the blue color. Then click on the plus button and the new button and rename the material Yellow Crystal. And change the color to a bright yellow. I'm using the hex code of BDB510. Change the surface from diffuse to emission and the strength to 1.5. Then select all the other crystals and apply the yellow color. And there you have your fantasy style scene. I hope you found this useful. Have a good day.